2000s Christian rock bands, where did they go? Who else remembers having to listen to the alternatives of Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit, Rage Against the Machine, because your parents thought it was all demonic? So what did they say? Hey, here's 1000-Foot Krutch, here's Pillar, here's Skillet. So what's up guys, I'm Dave, and this is something I've been wanting to do for a long time, specifically this kind of music, because it was my roots, and it helped me evolve into the guitar player I am now. I'm going to take you guys through a journey of all the songs, all the albums I had growing up, all the riffs I learned on guitar, and once upon a time, if you were that kid too that had to go to the Christian bookstore to find CDs because your parents wouldn't allow anything that had the secular connotation over it, then welcome to my series. This is for you. So without further ado, I want to get into one of the very first CDs I ever had. In fact, the first CD I had. This is mmhmm by Relient K. Man, so this mmhmm album, I had previously heard of, Pressing On, Sadie Hawkins Dance from The Anatomy and Tongue in Cheek. My older friends at youth group had played these songs, right? They were all older than me, for starters. I was playing bass when I was around 11 or 12 for the youth group band, and they were all 18 to 20, something like that. So they introduced me to all this good stuff, right? I'd heard More Than Useless on the radio, I'd heard Who I Am Hates Who I've Been, and of course I heard Be My Escape. Now, what was cool, I actually had the guitar tab book for this particular album. I bought it when the CD came out, when I got the CD. I remember the only song from this album I wasn't allowed was My Girl's Ex-Boyfriend, simply because, Mum said, I don't want you to think about girlfriends until you're 21. And that's, your wish was granted, Mum. Speaking of first CDs, this one was the first CD that I was lent by my bass player mentor in youth group, who was, I played bass first when I was 7. So this guy took me under his wing, kind of gave me that, a technical book called Slap Bass, where I learned to do a bunch of intermediate licks, slapping. And that's responsible for some of the prog music I like to play on guitar now. This album is called Set It Off by TFK, or 1000-Foot Krutch. What's cool with this album is it was very hip-hop, nu metal influenced. So when I first heard this album, the songs I'd heard on the radio when I was this 10-year-old, right, were Set It Off and Superfly. Particularly, I remember Superfly. A lot of the young guys in the youth group band would riff it out on the guitar. They'd tune a drop D. Drop D is thanks to this album. This was the first piece of music and audio gold that I heard that introduced me to drop D. And it changed my world, of course, as it changes every 13-year-old boy or 10 to 13-year-old boy's world when they're growing up as a guitar player. Now, unfortunately, I was never allowed to buy this CD as a 10-year-old because, a lot of the lyrical connotation, there weren't enough biblical references in songs like Set It Off and Superfly. So I was simply lent this CD, listened to it, fell in love with it, and then had to give it back, sadly, to my bass player mentor at the time. And it was just never heard from again. I had to sneak it, songs on maybe LimeWire or YouTube, which we never did because that was illegal. Set It Off was in 2001. When they made Phenomenon in 2003, there was not as much hip-hop in this one. I remember Rockfist kind of had that Set It Off vibe to it, but they definitely evolved a lot. And a lot of bands were doing that from the early 2000s, late 90s, changing into that kind of more singing style, Limp Bizkit did it, p.o.d. were doing it, you name them, they were all doing it. Next up is Project 86, Songs to Burn Your Bridges By. This was another album that I was introduced to by actually my babysitter for this one. When I was 10 years old, she brought this CD. She knew I liked some of the riffs from Set It Off, and she said, I got something for you. So she put Songs to Burn Your Bridges By in the stereo, and Spy Hunter started blasting away, and I said, what in the world is this? It's like Set It Off. It's like Skillet, only even more aggressive. And that was how I knew I was going to be a metalhead from the age of 10. This riff was a little bit more technical. So shortly after this album, I was introduced to Drawing Black Lines, self-titled. So I figured out really quickly these guys had a lot of the hardcore influence as well, when it came to also overlapping into nu metal. But this particular riff was one I definitely had to learn as well, simply because you're just riffing on the top string, you're in drop D again, and then you throw in that little melodic riff that he does as well. In the chorus. Little fun fact, Project 86 are still going. They just made a new album. And actually they just went through a whole breakdown fest. I believe a lot of the songs now are in drop A flat, if I remember correctly. It's been a little, I remember giving it a little listen. But complete change up from drop D. They fully went into this, metalcore realm or post-hardcore realm, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, you might want to check that out. But this album, I think Drawing Black Lines will always live rent-free in my head. Another one that was lent to me by the same guy, actually, that mentored me in bass was Pillar, Where Do We Go From Here? This song is called Hypnotized. So this was one I heard on the radio when this album came out. Once again, it was in 2005, so the album was a year old. And I was this, cool 10-year-old that heard, oh wait, this isn't in drop D, this is in drop C. Now, Pillar, Where Do We Go From Here is also similar to the route that TFK took, in which the album Fireproof, which was given to me again around the same era by another guy in youth group, was more of that rap, hip-hop, kind of nu metal sound, and then Where Do We Go From Here took that more melodic singing route, but still had the rocky heaviness to it. And it was just really beautiful because it was, like I was saying, drop C. So a lot of these songs were in C minor, Hypnotized, Simply. Fun fact, actually, I saw these guys in Ohio not long ago. I drove 8.5 hours because I wasn't sure if this was going to be their last show or not. And that was earlier this year in July, I believe. So that was super cool, I felt like a 10-year-old all over again, so that was amazing. Pillar went on to make also some great music. I was heavily into their album The Reckoning as well. For the Love of the Game was awesome. I kind of checked out after the Confessions album. There was some good songs on it. I remember Fire on the Inside I loved, but nothing hit like Where Do We Go From Here and Fireproof for me personally. I did actually buy Above 2 years later in 2007, so I was like 12, and that album hit as well. It was kind of like Fireproof, but I think Fireproof won it a little bit more for me. So yeah, Pillar. Now this is a band that is actually still going under a new project now. Yeah, that's right, the Chilling Alpine Adventure. And this is a song that was actually from the album Fangs by Falling Up that was made in 2009. It was a concept record. I was not allowed it because it didn't talk about the Bible at all, right? It was talking about a whole bunch of adventurous, poetic, theatrical stuff, and it was awesome. But yeah, my parents didn't like it. But this album is Crashings, which was the debut made in 2004. Now, in 2005, I bought Dawn Escapes. I heard on the radio Moonlit, and that song just wrecked me, right? As a 10-year-old, that song was amazing. And this album, Crashings, I'd heard the song Broken Heart, saw the music video for it. I knew the song Ambience, I think it was. But Bittersweet, man, the intro. And then when the guitar, the drums come in, it just punches you in the face, man. What I loved most about this album by Falling Up and the next one, Dawn Escapes, was they had that real, it was almost the nu metal themed, but they had this punky alternative punk vibe to them as well. And the guitars, what I thought was really unique at the time, I was not introduced to much music, so they would do add 9 chords. In other words, they'd take the power chord shape right, and then they would play a whole step up on the 4th string, the add 2nd or the add 9. So it just gave this real suspended sound, and it was really common for bands to do this, but Falling Up just really really milked it, and it was amazing. Right, what do we have next? I'll tell you what we have next. We have a band called Red. This album is the song Breathe Into Me from the album End of Silence. I remember when this album came out in 2006, 11 years old. I remember hearing it on the radio, Breathe Into Me. I remember them doing an interview with Red on a show called The Reality Zone. And this was in Australia when I was growing up in Australia at the time, when I was this age. So if anyone knows about The Reality Zone that's watching this, man, that would be something. I don't know if there's any archives on these interviews, but they would interview a lot of these Christian bands, you know, the rock bands, whatnot. And, oh man, that would be a trip down memory lane. Anberlin. This song is called Ready Fuels. Check this out. I did not buy the debut album by Anberlin. Actually, I didn't buy any of the albums by Anberlin until 2008. However, when Cities came out, when I was a 12-year-old in 2007, there were songs that were in, you know, drop C again. So C minor. I figured out I loved C minor. It was just so emotional to me. Every single song from Cities, I loved. Every single song. I remember hearing on the radio Whisper and a Clamor. Of course, Unwinding Cable Car. You name it, man. Godspeed, Adelaide. This album was so good. But I also heard songs from Never Take Friendship Personal. So I knew that title track. I knew the song, what was the song called? Time and Confusion would play on my local radio station. I was from a small town called Geraldton, Western Australia. And so it was awesome to get a taste of all this music. And so I did not actually... I only knew of Ready Fuels because who remembers Pure Volume back in the day? MySpace and Pure Volume were, if bands were generous enough, they would let you download some of their songs. And so Pure Volume, I think it was, Anberlin was so kind as to let me download Ready Fuels and Glass to the Arson. Okay? These were two songs that I had from the debut album. If there's anyone else out there that lived the same life as me, would go to Pure Volumes, would find the free tracks, I would love to be your friend, because we have a lot in common. I recommend checking out Cities by these guys. You will not be disappointed. Perfect alternative punk, just emo, I guess, band from back in the day. I borrowed this next album the same time I borrowed Where Do We Go From Here from the same guy. This album is Nothing Is Sound by Switchfoot. One song that I just absolutely love off this album is called Stars. Here is Stars. Now, most of us know the album Beautiful Letdown by Switchfoot from this era. Of course, was absolutely amazing. Everyone heard Meant to Live, right? Dare You to Move, This Is Your Life, Are You Who You Want to Be? Oh, so good. But this one album here that had Stars, I think Stars is one of my all-time favorite songs by Switchfoot from this era. This riff, man, the drop D and then using the octaves, I ate that up as a kid, man. I was 10 years old again once I borrowed this album, the same time I borrowed Where Do We Go From Here. Now, as an album, the whole album, I didn't like it as much as Pillar, TFK, and these guys. Those bands were just top-notch for me as a kid. I think I was drawn to the more aggressive music at the time, but I just wasn't allowed it. So something about not being allowed it, but listening to it was just, felt dangerous maybe. And so that's why I gravitated towards it. I don't know. But Switchfoot, they had these good songs, but they were not as like punky, or they didn't really have that heavy influence. So I was not as into them. And a lot of their songs did not resonate with me as much as bands, you know, maybe like Relient K, that were the pop punk sound. Anberlin, those were a lot more moving to me than Switchfoot. But this one song and some others by Switchfoot will never be taken for granted. They are heavily played. I actually bought the album Oh Gravity, I remember, in 2008, and I even really liked that album. It was very different, but there were songs on it that were just very moving. Alright, what else do we have? Let me put on my thinking cap. Skillet! Who could forget? Last but not least, right? Okay, so here's a story with Skillet, right? My parents had an album by Skillet, and you could probably guess which one it was. It was the Worship album that I think they made in 2000. So, of course, naturally hearing the youth group members talk about Skillet, I thought, oh, boring. But then they'd said, oh no, Skillet are crazy. And I said, what do you mean they're crazy? My parents have a CD by them's, and it's definitely not crazy. It's very boring. And they said, oh, no, you just wait and see. So little did I know, I had heard a song by Skillet on the radio called Collide. And I remember thinking, wow, this is beautiful. Like, it was a slow tempo song, but it had some heavy distorted chugs in it, right? It was in drop C# tuning. I remember that much. So a fun fact, actually, I do have really good perfect pitch or relative pitch, I think. And so keys, you hear me talk about keys a lot. They kind of reflect the emotion or the colors I feel in a certain song, the way I feel about a song. So that's why I refer to it a lot. When I think about a lot of these particular bands that I was drawn to, it was because of the keys that they wrote the songs in. And, riddle me that. I don't know. But that's why I wasn't into a lot of classic rock growing up, like a lot of kids get into when they first start learning guitar, because a lot of that was in standard tuning. So that would equate to keys like E minor, A minor, being the most common. And those did not move me as emotionally. So, dude, I might have a little bit of autism or something, man. I don't know. But yeah, I'm just sharing with you my life, so enjoy. Without further ado, I actually had a Skillet album. It was the second album I got. It was called Alien Youth. And I bought it in America when we visited. I have family in America. I have family in Australia. Mum, Australia. Dad, America. Okay. So I bought this album along with mmhmm. And from the opening, Drop C, Alien Youth, amazing, Earth Invasion, Eating Me Away, these songs that were in Drop C, I said, oh man, I love Drop C tuning. I love C minor. But then I heard Collide was even crazier. And I looked it up in 2005. It had already been out for a year. And I saw a music video for the song Savior. And I said, what is this? And the song's in D minor, but I believe they recorded most of the songs in drop C tuning. I love this album. I remember I bought it shortly after that. Somehow my parents allowed Skillet. Thank you, Mum and Dad. I guess because they had a lot more Bible references in the music and they weren't... I don't know, I guess something about Skillet was... They have this family-friendly vibe to them. And I guess that goes to show now with how well they're doing in the Christian market, right? Like, everybody loves them. They're basically the Ken and Barbie doll of Christian music, Christian rock music, Skillet went on to make Comatose, which was also just an incredible album. It had the heaviness, but it also had this evolution of songwriting and these melodies. I remember hearing Rebirthing on the radio when it came out, and it just spine chills. It was in C# minor, nerding out, and so many other songs from this album were just outstanding. And so yeah, check out Comatose, check out Collide if you want to go for that little more old school nu metal sound. But yeah, so there you go. I talked about TFK, I talked about Pillar, Project 86. We cannot end this video without talking about p.o.d. Now, p.o.d, there were so many songs from Satellite that were playing on the local Christian radio station. Okay, there was this one station, there was this one segment called The Mosh Pit, which was basically every Friday night they would play 3 hours worth of the underground, heavier music. p.o.d were on it, Project 86 were on it, even a TFK Set It Off song was on it, but then also heavier stuff too, like Living Sacrifice, Zayo, Blindside. Oh man, also good. Okay, so The Messenger is one song that was on this album from Satellite by p.o.d. Check it out. Drop D tuning, fun little riff in there, fun little lead lick in there as well, if you want to call it lead. But this song just got me pumped, man. I remember I would play bass along to this song whenever it came on the radio, and it was fun because they did this song and other songs in this album in drop C, I believe, but a lot of them you could kind of figure out in drop D, right, including this one. So yeah, Satellite by p.o.d. Man, p.o.d made some other great stuff. I remember heavily checking out There was Draw the Line from the first album, Snuff the Punk. Brown, there was a song from Brown on this mosh pit segment of the radio that I loved. It was, what was it called? It was called Brown. Yeah, it was the title track. Man, they had some heavier stuff. It was fun though. But yeah, Southtown, who could forget that? I might actually do a video on that one. That's a pretty heavy song. So, Christian rock riffs from the 2000s. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Now, if you love Christian rock like me from this era, please leave that thumbs up and subscribe. Give me some engagement, because I want to do more of these. I want to bring to light a lot of this kind of early stage of music that shaped a lot of us, you know, sheltered Christian kids that wanted to be musicians but didn't really have much to sift through in the network when it came to bands that we loved. But, you know, we all evolved. Thank you guys for watching. Please stay tuned for the next video. Dave out.